All right. Well, we're about 96 people in. It's officially 12:02, so yeah, I'm gonna kick off. Welcome everyone to our latest AMA of the week. This week, off the tail of our last big community update AMA last week with L1 leadership and our CEO, where we talked about our updated roadmap, mainnet plans, and airdrop 2.0. We are now here this week to talk about Avalanche, specifically our partnership with Ava Labs, how we're going to be working together, and what L1 community members can expect over the next few months as we kind of like launch and collaborate together. Just as some quick housekeeping before we kick off and dive into questions, in case you missed it, last week we actually posted a big education post on the LAMINA1 Medium page, kind of outlining a bunch of information about our partnership with Avalanche, what the chain is, our kind of history. We did a deep dive into their architecture, their amazing kind of subnet functionality that we're going to be leveraging when we launch. So if you have not checked it out yet, we definitely encourage you to. I'm going to drop it in the chat now so you can read along and check it out while you're listening. But yeah, as I kind of said in our preamble or mic check, today we're joined by LAMINA1 Chief Technology Officer Will Carter, who you should all be well familiar with, as well as Lucian Stroie from Ava Labs. So welcome. I guess to kind of kick off, Lucian, do you mind making just kind of a brief introduction to the community? Who are you? What do you do at Ava Labs? And why are you here today?
Hey, my name is Lucian Stroie, and I lead the Ava Studios team. You can think of it as kind of like a implementations team that helps people figure out all of the details in launching a subnet. Subnet's a scaling solution. Scaling solutions in blockchains are hard and scary. So we work closely with our most important partners, and we make sure that our technology fits your needs. And we basically don't make it so that you're heading into a permissionless blockchain world all on your own. And we try to be um, as supportive as we possibly can. We basically have people all around the clock able to respond to any potential incidents. And we also have kind of like a lot of experience that we can share through our ecosystem, having launched close to 40 subnets so far this year. Um, yeah, we're trying to basically build the best ecosystem to launching your own kind of like sovereign network on top of Avalanche and figuring everything out along with you and kind of like meeting all of your requirements and figuring out like how to make sure that when you do launch, you're successful. That's kind of what my team does.
Awesome. Thank you so much for the introduction, Lucian, which definitely illuminates, I think, what we're going to be working on together over the next few months as we transition from, Lamina1 beta net to a chain that's kind of launched on and within the Avalanche ecosystem. So yeah, I mean, we're super excited. This is actually our first ever AMA in partnership with Avalanche. Hopefully the first of many. And I'm sure, as you can imagine, we've received a ton of questions from our community about you guys. The benefits of building on your chain, what the partnership is about, what this means for Lamina1. So definitely want to use the bulk of this time just to like dive into questions. On that note, all of these are kind of sourced from our AMA questions channel and also a bunch of like community discussion feeds, recent survey and feedback forums, as well as last week's big community update AMA. If at any time you have like a follow-up question that you'd like to ask while we're talking, feel free to drop it in the chat now. And just also in general, as a courtesy, we are not dropping the secret code here until the end of the AMA. So hold tight, questers, and make sure you listen all the way through. So yeah, I guess like our first question I wanted to dive into is from community member Maragung, who asks basically, what does the Avalanche partnership exactly mean for Lamina1 and the Ava Labs team? Like, what exactly are we partnering on together from like a very basic level?
I can speak on LAMINA1's behalf here, obviously. So I think we've talked about this a few times, specifically with Rebecca, on where our ultimate mission, or LAMINA1's ultimate mission, is not just to build another blockchain, right? It's to be a platform that enables creators to kind of build the open metaverse together. And while decentralized infrastructure and blockchains are a really important piece of the open metaverse, it's by far or it's far away from being the only piece of the puzzle. And so much of our team is really uniquely qualified for and experienced in bringing together the other pieces of the puzzle needed for that open metaverse. And so this partnership with Avalanche really allows us to focus our time and resources on building the unique features needed for the open metaverse that we can then deploy on the kind of robust, proven infrastructure of Avalanche and sort of enjoy interoperability with their existing community of users, applications, and marketplaces. And on the flip side, we hope by doing so, we also enrich their ecosystem by providing an influx of mainstream users, as well as some of the powerful creator tools and experiences we're building. I don't know if Lucian, you want to cover from the AVAX side.
Yeah, Avalanche is a protocol, and we obviously, by being a protocol, don't get involved in the application layer. But the part that we do get involved in is making sure that we create probably the best ecosystem for developers to launch in. And we basically work together to solve all of the challenges that our ecosystem needs to face. And we try to face the hard problems first so that we could then take lessons learned and bring them to ecosystem partners like Lamina1. Building like production blockchain systems, it's an adversarial computer network, right? Anyone can join and do whatever they want. And that also means that it's pretty hard to maintain stability and keep it up. A lot of projects previously, for example, had difficulty running RPC infrastructure. So what we've done is essentially take all the lessons learned of like several years of relative stability on mainnet and just made it available to our ecosystem partners. And you guys can focus on what you do best, and we can just keep focusing on making the protocol better and better for everyone.
Awesome. We also got a bunch of questions from users like Noxy, Stone66, and Slava Odinoki, who asked, what prompted both of our companies to join forces, and like, what are the shared objectives of this partnership? I think I'll do another thing where we kind of start off with Will and kind of like bounce over to Lucian. But yeah, what's the reason for kind of joining up with Avalanche, and what are we going to be doing together?
Well, I mean, Avalanche specifically was an obvious choice. I mean, we've talked about in previous AMAs why we chose to build on the Avalanche protocol specifically, as opposed to some of the other protocols that exist out there. So we were already pretty enmeshed in leveraging the Avalanche protocol, and as you heard from Lucian, they've got a powerful team with a lot of experience, kind of building out infrastructure not only around the protocol but around supporting people who are deploying on that protocol. And so it just made sense for us as an organization and a platform that's trying to facilitate kind of the seamless and easy migration to Web3 infrastructure to partner with an organization that has several years of experience doing that. Um, and, we again could kind of focus a lot of our resources and focus away from reinventing what is already a really capable wheel that the Avalanche team is already spinning with their live platform.
Awesome. Yeah,
And
that kind of leads into like another question, like kind of below and kind of related to this one, which is like, that's why we joined, but in your kind of opinion, Lucian, like why would Avalanche want another chain like Lamina1 to like launch on you guys?
well, first of all, we're fans. And I mean this quite literally. Like Neil Stevenson is like the sci-fi inventor of cryptocurrency with Cryptonomicon, and like the foray into the metaverse as well definitely is going to be incredibly interesting, and we want to be a part of it. Um, we focus on deep tech problems, but at the same time, like it's primarily to enable communities to explore vision that's beyond our own comprehension of what could and should be done using our technology. And Will, you lead a really good tech team. We're really excited to have you as a developer within our ecosystem, and honestly, we're better for it. Um, so Avalanche as a whole, we're really nothing without the projects built on top of Avalanche. Um, and I mean that quite literally. We when I first joined Avalanche, there wasn't a single dApp deployed. I was one of the first application developers, and it's not fun building in a ghost town. You end up having to do a lot more yourself, and the core technology allowed us to create an ecosystem and bring on people, and we're very kind of like tech centric. A lot of people have found us originally because of our core technology and the minor differences that like essentially we've been able to exacerbate into like a sustainable competitive advantage in this massive global marketplace for block space. But at the same time, it's only because we've been able to properly attract and meet the needs and requirements of projects like yours. And I'm actually quite happy that we did join forces, right? Your original goal was to essentially fork that Avalanche protocol. And the fact that we were able to find a way to make the protocol flexible to meet your needs so that we could join forces just kind of reinforces the kind of flexibility that we've built, because we'd be able to like extend our protocol and kind of embrace more and more use cases and essentially expand, because the interoperability that we have with other ecosystems that hopefully we'll touch on soon is only going to make us all more powerful. And it's, I mean, the best part about kind of your vision is just how interoperable it could be with other parts of our ecosystem, especially the gaming part. I think it's just a great value add for both the games deploying, but also for Lamina 1, I'd hope.
Yeah, awesome. Sort of related to that, actually, moving on to our next question from one of our most active community members, Killen, who kind of noted last week, I've been really starting to look a lot more at Avalanche's subnets to better understand, how they work, how Lamina One's going to fit into the Avalanche ecosystem, like how interoperability will kind of function on the side. So I guess to kind of start out for our like kind of beginner creator focused community members, like what is a subnet and like why do they matter to specifically to the L1 community?
So I'll take this one since we've spin up subnets all the time, I guess. And a subnet is a sovereign network, which means that it can stand alone and it can continue, even if the Avalanche main network goes down. You run your own consensus, and it basically means that a group of Avalanche validators agree on anything. In this case, it's Lamina 1. And this can essentially mean that Lamina 1's subnet validators can themselves spin up other chains. That's possible. And it also means that you can spin up your own gas token, your own staking token. It means that you have full control over your fee structure. It also means that Avalanche isn't gatekeeping or collecting a toll per transaction. Um, we're rather flexible in how you basically structure these overlapping validator sets. The only requirement to be a subnet is essentially that your validators are also part of the Avalanche network as well as a whole. And the benefits that come from that are native interoperability, which means that you can bridge in and out of Avalanche mainnet. and interoperability with other subnets and interoperability with other projects within the ecosystem. And we're finishing that vision of native interoperability now. The actual testnet version should be live by the end of the year. So we're basically a protocol that allows you to communicate between sovereign networks while also having a full main network. Sorry if I got too technical for folks.
Yeah, actually kind of interesting, like kind of diving a little bit deeper. Killen also kind of asked, like, okay, so under that subnet architecture, and this one's going to be for you, Will, but like, is LAMINA1 going to have its own subnets within the chain on Avalanche? And like, what does a subnet within a subnet even look like? Like, what is that architect? Can you give us like a little bit of a preview on like what that architecture is going to look like?
Yeah, I mean, as Lucian said, they've created a very flexible protocol here, and we've explored a couple different approaches for how we're going to use that protocol to architect Lamina1 within the Avalanche ecosystem. We have explored subnets within subnets. We've explored launching multiple subnets. With multiple chains. We're probably going to start by launching a single subnet with multiple chains and potentially expand out into a handful of other subnets. The notion of a subnet within a subnet was initially really attractive to us because the hope was that it would help us facilitate kind of sovereign subnets that have validators that aren't required to be Avalanche validators. Just because of the kind of fee barrier to becoming an Avalanche validator, but you do lose the interoperability aspect, which we think is really important. And so we moved a little bit away from that. There's also a lot of complexity involved with being a subnet of a subnet and building like really compelling streamlined user experiences because now you're dealing with trying to interoperate between subnets like at two different layers, some of which aren't even directly connected. They have to be like facilitated through the parent subnet. So long story short, yes, we've explored it. We do think there are some useful scenarios where we could leverage the subnet as a subnet approach. Specifically early on, though, we're probably going to be launching a single subnet and then closely followed by some auxiliary subnets, and we'll share that architecture a little later on next year.
Awesome.
And in reality, that's kind of how we share the vision too. It's you get your own block space, so fill it. You can fill it up
Right.
with NFTs, you can fill it up. And when you need more block space, then you essentially can create another. And then they'll interoperate amongst each other. So as your ecosystem grows, so can kind of the multiplication of subnets as well.
A live question actually that I think kind of builds upon it. So Enotique is kind of asking like, is this kind of like interoperability that we're talking about? Is it like similar to Cosmos interoperability, or is it like something more or different? Like, um, how would you answer that question, Lucian?
It's very similar in concept. Cosmos has something called IBC, inter-blockchain communication, and essentially you run a light client which verifies the activity on another chain. In Avalanche, you don't need to do that because we're part of a superset. We know already who the validators are on any other subnet from just running the main network. So the end result is we have the ability to have the same interoperability primitives as Cosmos, but less of the overhead when you start thinking multiple chains down the road. So you're able to basically interoperate with all of the gaming subnets without any extra overhead than you already have in your current setup. The end result is that interoperability is actually much cheaper on Avalanche, and there is a bit of an issue with essentially very Running too many chains adds too many compute resources in a Cosmos setting.
Yeah, that's super interesting. We're getting like a lot of questions, or at least a lot of like cheers in the chat that people are talking about, like, oh man, yes, so this means we get to keep our sovereignty. Like, I think there's a lot of like interest, and a lot of people are excited that like us launching on Lamina1 means that we have our sovereignty, we get to keep a lot of our independence, we get to continue building. But got a question from HJA20. I think this one will be for you, Will, but basically asking like, how does this affect like our current sort of Lamina1 Hub staking wallet betanet infrastructure? Like, what will this partnership with Avalanche kind of look like from like a user external facing perspective as we move toward mainnet?
It's a good question. We're still architecting out the final solution, and so some of the details might change. But broadly speaking, the Lamina1 staking wallet, which is a fork of the original Avalanche web wallet, is likely going to be deprecated because when we enter the Avalanche ecosystem, we'll probably be just directing people to use Avalanche Core for any of the Avalanche specific transactions that they want to make. So things like staking, for example, the hub continues to be a primary focus of ours. So that will kind of continue development as normal. In fact, you as a user of the hub probably won't even notice the migration to Avalanche specifically, other than when we do support kind of subnet to subnet transactions, there'll be a lot more people you can transact with than in BetaNet. So as far as tooling goes, we get to, and again, one of the reasons why we were excited to work with Avalanche is we get to adopt a lot of the tooling and infrastructure that they've already built out, including like Explorers, the Avalanche Core wallet, while we get to focus on just developing out the L1 Hub with all the unique, cool functionalities that we're building out.
Awesome. Our next question, and I know we touched on this a little bit, but I'd like to dive a little bit deeper. This one's from user Dell, who basically says, I really think Avalanche is a perfect fit for Lamina1. I'm already a validator running an Avalanche node. I love the interface. So a lot of questions, probably our most common questions, because our validators are by far our most active users, but like, what does this partnership mean for validators of Lamina1? And like, for those unfamiliar, like what is Avalanche's validator infrastructure and like process like currently?
So currently
Go ahead, Lucian.
I was
Yeah,
just gonna
we'll
say
have Lucian
currently
start.
there is a 2000 AVX staking requirement currently. However, because our goal is essentially to grow the number of projects and enable permissionless validators so that you can use your own staking token, and not have our token economics kind of like overshadow yours in any way. We have something called ACP 13. You could look it up on our GitHub, and it's an Avalanche community proposal. And the beauty of that is we're actively debating just reducing that initial buy-in cost with a much smaller kind of like burn mechanism. Instead of having 2000 of Vox, we were aiming like having potentially a small burn of AVEX monthly, but having like all of the economic weight on the Lamina1 token when it's being staked. So the idea being you don't have to have like a large buy-in into Avalanche and then have a large buy-in to Lamina1 to be able to become a validator to Lamina1. So this is something that we're really happy to kind of be rolling out, and we're expecting to have enabled permissionless staking by I would say Q3 of next year at the latest. There's a couple more kind of like details in which it's fully enabled. Teleporter, of course, is like imminent, and we've been trying to push that through so that we have native interoperability from the start. But the very next thing is basically making it just so that kind of having this permissionless ecosystem of staking just works seamlessly. And we're hearing all of the proposals, and we have a major one that would address that issue straight up.
Super interesting. I know that that'll be really exciting for a bunch of our, and that also aligns very well with our current timeline too. Will, is there anything else you want to add before we jump into another question?
Yeah, so I mean that's a huge initiative for us, obviously. And I mean one of the original reasons why we wanted to fork Avalanche was because of kind of that economic barrier to coming into the network. So I think that'll be really exciting for us and for our validator community. In the meantime, we are looking at a couple of ways that our existing infrastructure operators, right now validators, um, can move over into the Fuji testnet network with us, and then overall into mainnet. So right now, everyone who's operating infrastructure at Lamina1 is a validator. So you're operating the blockchain and the core VM for the blockchain. There are other kind of services that you can operate for infrastructure. So we're looking at providing a way for community members to operate bundler infrastructure that would support account abstraction, ways to operate storage infrastructure. So as an alternative or as an alternative to IPFS, so somewhat centralized storage mechanism that you pay for, or IPFS nodes directly. And so our hope is that we can still give you some options by which you can operate some infrastructure and earn some Lamina1 tokens without having the the requirement to own AVAX early on. And then once the new initiative ACP 13 comes out, then you can also move over to being a validator.
We got a question in from one of our resident hackers and coders, Ed Keys, who's asking, regarding the validator incentives and potentially reducing the stake to become one, how much damage could a malicious validator or a colluding set of nodes actually do? He asks.
Bill, do you want to start with that one? I'll just follow up. Or I can take it.
I actually didn't hear the question. Yeah, if you want to take it.
Yeah. So don't let anyone tell you that a blockchain is resilient to more than 33% of the stake weight attacking the network. In fact, your protocol will not operate as designed when 33% of the stake colludes. It doesn't matter the number of validators, stake weight is what matters in proof of stake networks. But in Avalanche's case, the network will halt. Blocks will stop being produced. It will actually happen before 33%. And essentially, if the network doesn't agree, then it simply won't process any blocks. We say in Avalanche, we prefer safety over liveness. So rather than propagating a invalid transaction that's not accepted by the network, it's better not to proceed. It's a pretty good feature. In the end. Then the next thing is like, what would you do? How much of the network would you actually need to control? And you would need more than 66% of stake weight in order to start processing malicious transactions. And you may need even more than that if you want to be able to actually bridge out tokens. So when you have more than 66% of the stake weight, you can essentially restart consensus with essentially all malicious nodes, and there's no real protocol that could save you at that point. However, our teleporter bridge does have configurable safety, so you could actually set it to be higher. 80, 90, even 100% of stake weight in order to bridge a transaction back to mainnet and to another network. Because in order to effectively steal funds from a blockchain, you do have to bridge it out. And otherwise, the network could essentially undo the damage done by the hackers, which at this scale will probably affect the entire network. So at that point, you're going to need to socially recover, coordinate with your community, and essentially reestablish the safety of the network. So these are the fail safes of how the systems work. It's happened before in proof of work. It's much less common, mostly unheard of without insiders participating in proof of stake. But I don't want people to get like overly comfortable with this because it is an adversarial network. If you drill into what happened to Axie Infinity, for example, one hacker gained control of 5 of 7 of the validators and was able to bridge funds out without being detected for a week. And it resulted in, I think, about $700 million worth of stolen funds. So, yeah, it's hopefully something that no one encounters, but we have thought about all of the failure cases and have tried to minimize it at every point.
Thank you so much for diving deep into that question. We definitely have like super thorough and forthright answer about everything. I know our communities like they really help us kind of like point out those potential errors and kind of things like that. So really, really awesome answer. Got a question from an anonymous question asker through one of our forums, kind of asking about the next steps for Avalanche. So I know you kind of mentioned warp messaging a little bit earlier in the AMA, but they're kind of asking like, are there any interesting kind of like tool sets, capabilities, tech, or feature releases that LAMINA1 builders or creators should be like keeping an eye on over the next few months as we make the migration over to Avalanche? Like, are there any really cool things you'll be rolling out that, you know, our users should be looking into, potentially helping to test, learning how to use as you roll them out?
Teleporter. Teleporter is the name of the native bridge protocol, and I liken it more to a new primitive that typically isn't available to blockchains, which makes interoperability a process that's not like the layer zeros or the axelars of the world. It's something you could code directly into smart contracts and then have the protocol manage the interoperability portion. And they actually have smart contract interfaces on both ends. So you could do really cool things that, like, for example, you could trigger a message. For example, I want to purchase an NFT on LAMINA1 subnet with a gaming token, and it's all built into the game's UI. You can actually do that with Teleporter. So it's a really powerful primitive, and I think just the surface of it has been scratched. So we're just focused on simple token transfers, making sure that it's robust and audited. But the types of use cases where you can trigger events and smart contracts from one chain in another to another, I think is like a greenfield type area that's just going to completely kind of revolutionize the industry. And I don't want to like undersell this either. I think it's really cool because you could build like single click checkout from one network to another. And the type of interoperability that you could build between projects is something that deserves to be explored fully. And I can't imagine kind of what the community and the wider ecosystem is going to come up with.
Super interesting. Will, on your end, are there any Avalanche tech or things like that that you're taking a close look at?
I think we just talked about the two big ones that we're super excited about. Both the ACP13, which would allow subnet only validators, as well as Avalanche work messaging and teleporter. We've already experimented a little bit internally with using AWM and teleporter to migrate assets between subnets on BetaNet. And I think we were just waiting for compatibility with C-chain so that we could kind of migrate assets directly to the primary subnet as well, and that would enable us to do some interesting things with our architecture, so that we could have, for example, a single staking token for multiple subnets, or some of the other architectural and token models that we're working towards. So those are definitely the big features we're looking at on Avalanche as well. So we're excited they're coming out now.
Cool. We also got a question from Erasmus, who's kind of asking, aside from features, like, are there any existing projects on Avalanche that we're looking forward to being interoperable with, or any sort of things within their ecosystem that you're interested in?
So, yeah, go ahead. Well,
No, go ahead, please.
you first, because I'm actually kind of curious to see which ones you're interested to being connected with first.
Well, yeah, you probably have the drop on the really good ones. We have an EAP who is in the Avalanche ecosystem, and so we're really excited about them launching their game on Avalanche and hopefully interoperating with them. And then I think Gunzilla is another big AAA gaming project that's developing on Avalanche that we're really excited about, and again, hoping to interoperate with and get some ideas on how they're leveraging some of the Web3 technology in AAA gaming. Those are my two primary ones, but go ahead, Lucian.
There's also Shrapnel.
Yep.
Shrapnel is a really good potential collaborator, and they have a in-game it's basically a tool that allows you to build skins that can appear in game, and then you could also trade them as layered NFTs. So they've been able to onboard NFT projects, for example, who've built like collaborations that appear like on skins for guns. That's going to be a really cool project to work with. I'm a big fan of Pulsar. The Pulsar game is really interesting, and their token economics is basically backed by a lot of experience in the gaming industry specifically. And they're trying to build a really interesting product there. There's a lot of games, to be honest, and the games are going to be coming out first, more so than anything else. There's also TSM, which is launching their Blitz app on a subnet soon. And that project is going to be awesome because there's going to be this collaboration between like esports teams, like TSM being one of the biggest ones, and content creators, and the idea of creating incentivized communities. And something that's probably not as prominently known about in this community is a lot of the traction that we've had with loyalty points programs in Asia specifically. SK Global launched the largest loyalty point system in Korea. We have several in Japan and one in Singapore as well coming in. So those, while not necessarily as tied to the metaverse side of things, it definitely is community building. And if you look into the project that SK built, it's actually a generative NFT where you have an avatar that you upgrade through your loyalty points. And like SK is one of the 5 massive companies in Korea. So they have things like Burger King and like other types of products that are just all combined into this like mega loyalty app. So it's kind of cool. If you ever look up their TV commercial, it's called Road to Rich. It's really cute and funny, actually.
I will definitely look into that. Right now we're using Zele, and we've had a bunch of community requests to consider other platforms like Galaxy and everything, but this sounds super exciting. Wow. All right. I'm gonna look into it. If any other community members want to look into it as well, and let me know your thoughts, please do. Super good lead. Awesome. We got another live question in from Ed Keys who asks, on the developer side, what are the fully supported languages or platform forms for Avalanche APIs? So far, I've mostly just been using EVM compatible libraries as a least common denominator, so I'm probably missing out on the really good stuff. So to kind of recap, like what languages are kind of supported right now?
Most folks are still using the EVM compatible version of subnets. So it's called Subnet EVM. So that's why most of the tooling people use is still EVM compatible. We've built something called Hyper SDK, which is a framework for building an entire custom blockchain. So you break EVM compatibility, but then you have a hyper scalable layer, and that's Rust that compiles to WebAssembly. We also do have like different levels of the stack where you could interact with it. Most EVM tooling focuses a lot on the front end, but if you go to avacloud.io, there's also a tool called Glacier, which is an indexing service, which will be available to LAMINA1 Subnet, Mainnet, Avalanche, Mainnet Ethereum, and all major subnets. And you could think of this as kind of like the indexing layer to the Avalanche ecosystem. So you could query structured data. So you can do so with Python. It's actually available in every programming language because it's a basic API schema. But the beauty of it is that it's a much more powerful framework and it uses real-time data that we index, and it's much more scalable if you're building like an analytics dashboard or some kind of like context-based app, even something as simple as like showing the um, NFTs that a specific address has, and you can just aggregate it over multiple networks using Glacier. So yeah, Glacier is kind of like an Avalanche power user tool, so to say.
Amazing. Yeah, we actually mentioned the Hyper SDK in the education post because I was looking into it too. I think, yeah, those capabilities are awesome. Jacko Girl actually just posted a link to a much deeper resource on what the Hyper SDK is. I think a bunch of our community members are commenting like, wow, we've got so much to look into now. So thanks so much for the mention. I do have a couple of like, just before we hop off, we've got about 15 minutes left in the call. Again, if anyone's got any additional questions, feel free to pop them in the chat now. But I think we're going to zoom out a little bit. We've got a bunch of like kind of big picture questions kind of populating the feed now that we've kind of gone into the technical stuff. But I think Enotique just is asking in general, like, what are the benefits for Avalanche in collaboration with LAMINA1? Like, what exactly, like, what are the reasons for partnering in terms of like, what are we getting out of it versus what are you getting out of it?
Yeah, in Avalanche's mission, we are trying to tokenize the world's assets. And we are making a big splash in gaming, partially because we really help projects scale to as many transactions as their infrastructure can handle. And then we feel that by enabling the most intense applications and like the applications that draw the most traffic and the most users, then we create an ecosystem that essentially becomes a self-fulfilling prophecy of sorts, right? And we don't collect fees for every transaction like other network designs, and that's intentional because we're in it for the long term. We're not trying to like temporarily boost like the AVEX token model by onboarding like millions of users. In fact, quite the opposite. We have a very long-term perspective in which we think all of the world's assets will eventually be tokenized in one way or another, and we're trying to build a protocol in which it's done. And much like how you guys want to create this like central, I actually don't want to butcher your mission statement, but the kind of interoperability of metaverse assets, I would actually love to know how you guys say it properly. It's very much a shared vision because it's like we're dividing pieces of an infinite space amongst each other. And we'd gladly help you kind of like find that niche and grow the community and not have any like rate limits or roadblocks in your way, and just let you expand and make it extremely cheap for you guys to like interoperate and grow and as much as the infrastructure can physically handle. Um, and that's the problem we love to solve. And in the end, I think like having a long-term perspective on growing the ecosystem and becoming like the core protocol that enables this will pay off as well. And I think with gaming and real-world assets and soon the metaverse projects and NFTs more generally, especially ones with utility or functionality in games. I think we've already kind of seen that ecosystem effect of just offering basically the best place to build. Um, and I saw it early on with Ethereum, and I have that same kind of excitement with like where Avalanche is now. Uh, just kind of being the place that attracts all the builders.
Oh, awesome. Will, do you have anything to add to that, like from the L1 side, like what are the benefits for kind of us? Is there anything that you want to add in terms of like our mission, riff off of Lucian's response?
Yeah, I mean, if similar to their vision, which is to be the best place for builders, like we want to be the best platform for creatives and for users to reach those creatives. So facilitating the ability for creatives to leverage the powerful technology that the builders are building, whether it's creating assets for interoperable games, or if it's for launching your own movies or music. We want to create a platform that enables you to easily access the technology that Web3 and specifically in this case, Avalanche provides, and do it in a way that's intuitive and easy to use. Because again, we think it's part of what Lucian was referring to, this flywheel of creative energy, attracting users and user engagement, which drives like really long-term economic growth and engagement. And so that's what we're trying to do is provide the tools and facilitate that relationship between creators and end users, and the kind of like economic and discovery and distribution and creation steps that go in between.
Amazing. And the final question that I want to end with before we kind of jump off and I share our secret code and everything is from O5WPS, which is basically, moving forward, how is the Avalanche team going to be supporting LAMINA1? Like, are you guys supporting us in any way? What does that relationship kind of look like as we kind of move toward migration and eventual mainnet launch in like Q2, Q3 2024?
Will, do you want to take that one?
Sorry, it broke up. Can you repeat the question, Amy?
Yeah, so how is Avalanche going to be supporting us as we make the migration and then move towards mainnet launch?
Yeah, so the migration to Avalanche is going to be gradual. So we're going to be deploying a version of the BetaNet and its tools over to the Fuji testnet first. We're going to be testing out a few of the architectural and token model approaches that I mentioned in one of the previous questions, and that we've been working through with the recently released word messaging functionality. And once we have some validation on that approach and the token model that goes with it, and we've got the hub and the Explorer up and running, then we'll invite some of our early testnet or BetaNet community testers to come over and start kind of pushing buttons and making sure everything's robust and working well. And then we'll begin planning the transition to mainnet. And throughout that process, we'll be working closely with Ava Studios and Lucian's team. They've been great so far in just helping us validate the early architectural decision making and token model approaches. So we're looking forward to working with them throughout the process. Not sure if you have anything on your end, Lucian.
We also help kind of stand up some of the early infrastructure that just powers blockchains behind the scenes, RPC and indexing, and making sure that you have everything that you need to be robust for your testnet. Because yeah, we want you to be extremely successful and to handle immediate scale as much as you need, basically.
Awesome. Well, thank you so much for joining us today, both Lucian and Will. That's going to be it for now. Again, this is kind of going to be the first of several kind of education initiatives and AMAs that we're going to be hosting in the lead up to launch and migration. I'm currently multitasking by typing in the secret code for this AMA, which you can redeem for a couple of XP points in our current Zealy Quest system. But yeah, I guess in terms of next steps, read our Avalanche education post if you haven't yet already. Get started on the week 14 quests. Those were launched on Thursday, and basically just show some love for Avalanche. Join their server, poke around, let us know your thoughts. We've got a new Avalanche discussion channel we did launch this week on Discord that you're welcome to hit us up in any time with any additional questions or thoughts once you've dived into a bunch of the resources we talked about today, from Hyper SDK to warp messaging and beyond. But yeah, stay tuned here. As kind of Will hinted, we're going to be doing some early Fuji testing in the beginning of 2024. And of course, our upcoming main launch on Avalanche is going to happen sometime next year between Q2 and Q3 2024. So I will be keeping you posted every step of the way. Lucian, hope to have you back on again sometime soon once things are really cooking in terms of the migration and partnership front. And again, thank you so much for joining. This was super helpful. Community is really excited, as I'm sure you can see.
Thanks for having me on, and I'm looking forward to it. Yeah, it's basically the best part of my job, watching your community succeed, essentially. I'm really excited to see what you guys build, and I love the excitement you guys have going on here. So, pleasure. Thanks for having me.
Cool. Thank you all. We're going to hop off. See you guys in the feeds. Later.
Bye, everyone.
Yeah.